at the New York Times' latest polling, Trump, election is today, Trump would win, probably pretty big. Republicans would have a very big night. That you would have an agreement with China. You might think there's all the tension, you'll get a lot of good news for a while, but I think we would be in a much stronger place because there'd be greater respect on each side, and that's where you can come to an agreement.
But an agreement on what?
I think you can get a lot of places on agreement on trade, agreement on the movement of China and Russia and Iran. I think China moving into the Middle East, bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, you wouldn't see that as much anymore. I think America would take back the place that they've stood before.
So you were with the former president last night. According to photos I saw online, what are you hearing from him and his team about what 2.0 would look like? Would that also maybe include someone like yourself?
Look, you never prejudge where it is, but I think the president, he's very upbeat. You look at what he's going through. Interesting thing, I think the White House has taken a position, and almost every position they're taking is all political, like this China position, Israel position, what he's looking at. And I mean, if you look at Biden in the last elections, and you're a station that plays with numbers, Biden won the last election by 48,918 votes. But his favorability rating at that time was plus 10. Now it's minus 20. You've got 6 states that are swing states, and Trump has been leading in 5 of them for like 14 months. And now Minnesota, which a Republican has not won since 1972. When Ronald Reagan swept 49 states, he didn't win Minnesota, but now it's a tie within Minnesota. So it's a much different play going forward. And I think their position, they thought going after Trump in a judicial way would help them. I think it's hurt them. You also see independents now. I mean, by a margin of 53 to 42, independents believe another 4 years of Biden will harm democracy. And they say democracy is on the ballot. So it's interesting what they have planned out. And my advice to the Biden administration, if you're in denial, you're not going to solve your problems. And they're kind of in denial of the problems they have.
Can I just ask you a follow-up, though? You didn't answer my question. Would you consider going into a Trump administration?
Look, I would consider to serve anywhere if I'm the best person. I think in America we need the best and brightest, but I think that's the last thing you look at. You want to lay out, make sure it's good policies. You want an election to be about policies and ideas. Then people can govern in a better way.
I want to try to strip away some of the politics from the policy.
Sure.
And try to understand looking forward. You talk about under a Trump administration this idea of some agreement with China. I'm more focused on Europe, frankly, because under a Trump administration it was America go it alone, America first, going out of NATO, really pressuring the European Union to do more. How much is that going to be basically the state of play going forward in a Republican administration at a time where a lot of people are saying you need an alliance to really counter some of these threats that you're talking about?
That's a great question. We should look, because now we have time to compare what transpired in the Trump administration and what happened now. Was Trump tough with NATO? Yeah, but now you're watching the European nations actually spend more what they had promised to do on their defense, which they haven't. But let me answer your question, okay? Now what you had, you didn't have war in Europe. For the first time in any American administration in modern history, Putin had not invaded another country. Now we have war in Europe. But let me finish your question. You have 5 American embassies that have now had to be evacuated. We now have a base in Africa where the Russians are now coming into, where you have 1,000 U.S. troops leaving out. It's the place we use our drones and others. So I know what the topic is, and maybe the brushness of Trump's message, but we actually had positive returns within there. So it's a difference of opinion, whether you like the headlines or not, but you really have actual facts on the basis of what a Biden administration looks like in Europe and what a Trump administration looks like.
Although there are long and variable lags with a lot of policies, so it's hard to identify exactly where some of the gains come from depending on who
We
comes
had
out.
the Abraham Accords, which I believe people should have got a Nobel Peace Prize over. But had Biden embraced the Abraham Accords, I don't think you would have had October 7th.
My question was with Europe, and particularly on the commercial side of things, because what we hear from a lot of executives is they don't know how to even shape policy, given they don't understand what the policy in the U.S. is going to be to European goods. Are they going to start to put up walls to those those two to try to really enhance the industrial production of the United States? Are they going to work together? Is there going to be cohesiveness at a time where France seems to open to the idea of accepting electric vehicles from China? How does a Trump administration deal with issues, given the fact that a lot of people say we need these alliances in order to actually win on some of these issues?
I think we have strong alliances. I remember the Trump administration. I was there with Macron in the White House. I mean, look, every country can want to compete with one another. I think what America wants to see is a level playing field. It's a disadvantage if America starts further behind. And in France, they want to have a level playing field, but every country is going to compete in different ways. And I just believe that at the end of the day, you will find the policies we have under the Trump administration, the policies we have today. America didn't have inflation. We were stronger around the world. Incomes were rising. And what you're finding in the New York Times polls, America sees that too. And I think the number one issue people are going to drive is going to be inflation, the border. Are they going to be the two largest drivers of this election?
You don't think that birth control and abortion are going to be a big factor as well?
I do think it'll be, but it'll be in certain spots. It was a big factor in the last election. But remember this. I mean, you also look to what's going to happen in the Senate and what's going to happen in the House. I was leader for 5 years, and every single cycle when I was leader, Republicans picked up seats, even though Republicans lost everywhere else. When Biden was on the ticket, it was the first time since 1994 not one Republican in the House lost. In the last election, abortion was a very big issue. But as leader, I picked up 5 seats in New York and 5 seats in California. You would say abortion would be the top issues there. So I believe in pockets. Arizona could be an issue. Florida could be an issue. But I think it'll be more in a pocket than it will be national.
You talk about your leadership. Speaker Johnson had 11 Republicans vote to oust him. You only had 8.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats came to save him.
Mm-hmm.
Are the Democrats in charge of the House at this point?
Hakeem thinks so. I mean, he says it on 60
Well,
Minutes.
they saved Speaker Johnson.
Look,
He actually had more Republicans vote against him than you did, but you lost your job.
that's not right, huh? Look, I don't believe in the motion to vacate. I think Democrats play politics on both sides. If they didn't think the motion to vacate was right then, why did they think it underneath? So, but it is what it is. It's politics. They think they're going to play it for a political purpose to win. Republicans have a better chance of winning seats in this election in the House than they did in the last 2 elections we won. So I think it's going to be a big night. You watch what happened in the primaries last night in Maryland. Hogan is going to make Maryland competitive. And what that does, it expands the playing field. The Republicans are going to win the Senate. It's a simple math question. The presidential election, it's still up in the air, but you look at every polling today, Trump is in the lead, and Biden's doing nothing to change that. In the House, there's a better opportunity for Republicans. The only challenge and advantage the Democrats have is they're beating us now on money rather largely, and that will make a difference.
I've got about 10 seconds left. Can you give us a name for VP? What do you think? Who would you like to see in that seat?
Look, there's some great people, and
10 seconds.
I sat with like Tim. Look, I think Tim Scott is great. I think our governor in North Dakota is excellent.
Nikki Haley?
Look, if he picked Nikki Haley, I would say the race is over.
Yeah, I think
The race is over.
That's the entire party.
If you look at the primaries, even in Indiana,
10, I've only got 10
20%.
left. So the break now, Kevin. We've got to go. Speaker McCarthy, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's do it again soon.
All right.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg. was going to keep winning the World Cup. This is a three.
As the economic picture
Covering the intersections of Hollywood, Silicon Valley.
access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
South Africa's most important election since the end of apartheid focuses on infrastructure challenges, economic growth, and political fragmentation. Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasaja reports live from key battlegrounds in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban.
We think that South Africa is an exciting part of the world.
South Africa is a thriving and vibrant democracy.
There's a lot of expectations for the election.
Coverage begins May 27th on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything. The names that move markets are on Bloomberg.
You know, all due respect and thoughts and empathy and sympathy for the people who are suffering at the moment, and there are plenty. It's not just Ukraine and Gaza, it's in many other corners of the world as well. But I'm constantly surprised by the level of resilience and the capacity to actually bounce back from those traumas. So I have faith in the human beings and their capacity to respond to adversity. We've seen it. You know, look, earlier in the pandemics, we thought that the world was coming to an end, right? It hasn't. Nobody thought that vaccines would come up in such a short period of time. And every time we have to constantly resurrect this spirit of resilience. But are you hopeful that I'm always hopeful. Come on, we have to be. We have to be.
Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
60 minutes away from a ton of economic data here in America. 8:30 Eastern Time, US CPI and retail sales. The scores going into it. Equity futures just about positive. Just about. We're positive by 0.0.